Welcome to APCUG's Wednesday workshop, where we get together in the middle of the week to learn more about technology. This is the third Wednesday of the month, and that has been in the past the traditional Linux Day, and we will be continuing that today with a Linux presentation. This is kind of a last of the presentations that came from the last year's survey. I'd like to thank any of you who did take part in the survey. It was a little disappointing, the number of responses that we have, but we've collected those responses, which in itself says, wonder where the interest is. And our Linux team is going to go and view and see what the results will be. We're not scheduled for a February because of the Saturday Safari. So that gives our team time to evaluate and then maybe start planning for presentations. So today is kind of like a finish up for 2024. Welcome you again to 2025 and all the weather that is across the country. Interesting, I said to stop hiding the panel and it's still there. So I can tell you don't see it, so that's fine. It's just in my way. Let's get back. So I will ignore my screen and look at the big one. All right. Still not back. Yay for editing. Today's presentation is going to be on desktop environments. Last year, towards the end of the year, a comment was made as we were talking about some of these different distros, different desktops, about you know, the differences, because it was a little bit confusing. And so as I wrote in the description, I said it's just a lot like cars. I said with cars, they have a lot of different manufacturers. With Linux, we have a lot of different distros. Within the cars, they have a lot of different models. And so the same thing kind of goes with Linux. We have a lot of different desktop environments. And so the question always gets thrown to a Linux person, well, why do you have so many? And I throw back, well, why are there so many cars? Why are there so many manufacturers of cars? Why are there so many different models of cars? And the simple answer is people have different choice or different interests, different desires, wants, whatever. And so the auto manufacturers have done that. And the same thing with Linux. And it's easier with Linux because Linux being open source, The recipe is out there. So anybody can take a Linux distribution and modify it to make one their own. That's why we have, 100, top 100, and then even more beyond that listed in the DistroWatch. And the same thing for these desktop environments. They're open source, so people can take them and modify them and make the desktop do whatever they want. This concept is very difficult for Windows people because Windows has one desktop and there's not much you can do with it other than a few, yes, minor changes. But with the Linux desktop environment, there are loads of different things. And of course, this is a Wednesday workshop, and it's me doing it today because nobody else would volunteer to do it. And I'm a member of the Speakers Bureau, and this workshop is provided as a benefit to your membership. Excuse me. I think a lot of groups are not taking advantage of this because we know from records that we have people who have groups that hardly anybody ever comes from or comes to one of our workshops. So here's what I've done today. I'm going to be talking about 8 different desktops, and that's not all of them. These are probably the most popular ones, and a couple that you don't hear about a lot. I was going to do a couple of others, but I think that would have really taken up a lot of extra time, and I was having trouble getting them to run in a live process. I researched, or tried to do a research, and find out what distro showcased the different desktops the best. So for today's presentation, I'm going to be showcasing these 8 desktops and the 8 different distros that supposedly showcase them. Fedora with GNOME, KDE Neon, even though we have a number of good GNOME distros and KDEs. Debian is going to be showcasing the Xfce desktop. Mint, which is one of our most popular versions of Mint with the Cinnamon desktop. Ubuntu with the Mate, because that's where most of the developers for Mate work. I'm going to share the desktop called Budgie, which is the Solus project, which came up with pretty much kind of their own. They kind of said, we're going to build it our own. I wanted to showcase LXQt because it's one of the recommended lightweight ones, but has lots of features that go with it. And then the last one, because it's a very unique one, this is the Enlightenment or E desktop version 17, but it's had its problems. And so the Budgie distribution has gone ahead and kind of improved it and has the better version of Enlightenment, Moksha. And so I wanted to share that. There was a couple of others that I wanted to do. I wanted to do the Deepin desktop environment, but I could not get it to run off a live disk. What I've done is I use this in what is it? Oh, Ventoy. And I got all these on there, so I didn't have to take the time to create virtual machines for all of these, because with the Ventoy, all you do is boot up to it. I'll also make sure people understand I'm not an expert on all of these, as again, if there's somebody who uses one of these a lot, but nobody else is volunteering to do presentations on them. These are what we would call vanilla. When I started them up, I did not add anything. I did not do any updates to the distros. I did not do anything to add any features or extras that didn't come with the original base. So somebody might say to something that I say, it can't do this, or it doesn't do this, or it's limited to this, might come back and say, well, yeah, it can do that. Well, probably because you've added something to it. So we're going to take a look at what we would say would be the basic one with no extra things added to them. We're going to take a look at a number of different sections that I think kind of showcase what's different about them. I am going to tell you in advance, I'm going to overload your brain today, but you get the slideshow. They're all going to be marked so that you know which desktop it is, because we're going to go through quite a lot of slides to showcase everything that's on here. I had some extra stuff planned, but I tossed them out because I decided it was not really the desktop, because it comes a fine line when it goes from the desktop environment into the actual distro that makes the changes or makes a choice. So let's get started. And we're going to get started with aisle 1 down this showcase or showroom. And aisle 1 is going to deal with the main screen, the panels, and workspaces or virtual desktops. That interchangeable, the two different names on that. We're going to go through each desktop for each area that I'm going to do. So we're going to start out with the GNOME desktop. This is the default desktop. And you will notice that up at the top corner, left corner, you have a button. And at the top right, you have the normal things for your system tray. Also, you'll note that the taskbar or the panel, some people call it taskbar, it should be called panel, is located at the top. Now, when you click on the the icons in the status bar, whoops, wrong computer. Got 3 going today. It drops down a box that has all of the submenus. They're not individual. It's just one kind of panel that drops down, and you have controls of your volume and all that sort of stuff, which makes it that's what they designed. Now, again, what I'll emphasize is that there is a team usually of people who sit down to put this together, and what you're going to see and what they have is the team's idea of this is how it should be. This is how we think it should be. Now, after we look at the main the screen, we're going to talk about what you can access by right-clicking. If you right-click on the desktop, you only get 3 different parts. Changing a background, which is very standard. You want to do a different color background. Display settings, which controls what your resolution and all, and just the settings. That's all. If you right-click on the panel, you get nothing, because the GNOME plan is you don't do anything with the panel. That's their thing, and that's it. So you right-click, you get nothing there. When you do click that button at the top right-hand corner, which is they call it their activity button, it pops up a screen that you can see the different virtual desktops. And down at the bottom, when you click on the Hollywood squares, it's going to give you a better control of these workspaces. And as you see at the top, there are two of them. GNOME gives you one to work with and a spare that you don't. So even though there's two there, you only have access to one. And with what you can do is you can add programs. You can go to desktop 1, add a program, and then add more programs, or then come back to desktop 2. You'd have to, click on the second desktop. But you can also, from the start menu, you will also see your programs, and you can just drag them. And so as you can see in this case, after I drug up a program, which was System Monitor, into the second panel, it automatically has a third desktop in reserve. I cannot actively get to it unless I, put a program in it, and then it'll add another one. So it keeps adding. And it does the opposite. When you remove a program from a desktop so that there's no more programs, GNOME will delete the extra so that you always have 1 plus 1 extra. Now let's take a look at the KDE desktop. That was what the KDE stand for, K desktop. And at the bottom, you can see a more typical panel or taskbar for Windows users with a button at the left side. Notice that they also have some icons on the taskbar panel for shortcuts. And on the right side, they have a little more elaborate system tray. And when you click on the little arrow, like in Windows that says show what's hidden, here are the other things that are automatically included. Now, when you right click, now you get more of a standard menu that Windows people are more used to having. And you can see that you can create things, you can access the wallpaper like the other one, and you can deal with your icons. If you right click on the taskbar panel, you get things that you can do as opposed to nothing that you can do with the GNOME desktop. With the KDE desktop, you can see I've highlighted that you can add widgets. These are things to the desktop. And on the left-hand side, just shows you the beginning of the list. It'll scroll down for some more. And according to the little green square at the top, you can go into categories. And these are actual things that go on your desktop. And some people like that, some people don't. So the KDE desktop environment allows you to put a lot of customization into that. The KDE also will allow you to add more panels. As we noticed in the GNOME, you right-clicked on a panel and you got nothing. But we can click on another panel and you can position it, you can size it. As you can see, all the different choices. You can make it semi-invisible. So you can control that a lot of with the panel. And if you slide your mouse to the left corner, that's a hot corner. So in KDE, that's where you would pop up and see your workspaces or desktops. Each people decide what they want to call it. You can already see that I've added a couple. You know, they started you out with one, but I want to point out something when we look at this. At the bottom, you'll notice that there is just one box down here at the bottom left-hand corner for the workspace because there is only one. I've added the 3 or the 2 more, so I have a total of 3, and I can click on each of those to switch to that and work. And these virtual desktops or workspaces are really great to help you organize and keep your computer working, your workflow better. I have 7 workspaces on my computers, and so you can customize those. I have one that's for security. That's where I have my VPN, any kind of, if I'm using any kind of virus program or whatever. I've got one that keeps all my email, one specifically for the terminal. I've now created one specifically for my file manager, since I use it a lot. That way I don't have to keep opening it and closing it, whatever. And then I have a one for internet for doing all my search. And then I've got 1 or 2 for just general workspaces for the different kinds of things I might be doing that isn't in the first categories. So now I want you to notice that down at the bottom, automatically, since I have 3 workspaces or desktops, I can now see 3 different ones at the bottom. So depending on what I've done in creating these virtual ones, automatically it gives me the workspace switcher at the bottom. So now I don't have to go into the top corner to get that to switch back and forth. I can just do it right down from the workspace switcher. That works out pretty good. Let's talk about the Xfce. A lot of people, I think, put their noses down or up for the Xfce because they think it's, something that's limited. But to be honest, the Xfce desktop is one of the most customizable desktops that are out there. It's maybe less weight than some of the others, but now the others are trying to make themselves not heavyweights. So it is, there's not as much difference. But with Xfce, a whole different concept of customizability. When we look at the main screen, you'll notice that this one has the taskbar at the top. It has a button that says applications. There's no start button. The KDE didn't have a start button. It was a symbol for KDE. It automatically has the taskbar switcher, plus you have your standard system icons. But notice at the bottom that the KDE or the Xfce has a dock, which is where your shortcuts or your favorites go. And that's something that's customizable, but that's their other thing. Excuse me. The other thing you'll notice for the first time, this desktop has filled with all of my partitions. Now, the Ventoy or the Xfce and all these were running on a Ventoy thumb drive plugged in. But because of Linux, it can see that I've got a dual boot computer with multiple partitions. And by default, the Xfce says we're going to show everything, but you can go in and turn that off. When you go to desktop settings for each of your desktop environments, you'll have a chance to see what you can show and what you can't. Don't get to see a lot on the GNOME desktop. All right, so that's their approach. They said, well, we know people want favorites, so we're going to go ahead and put a dock down there for you to put favorites. And we know people want to be able to use virtual desktops, so we'll create 4 to begin with. Remember, GNOME's gave you 1 with an extra available. KDE only gave you 1, and you had to go in and add 1. Here you start with 4. When you right-click, you get a whole bunch of menu choices. You could even open the terminal here, open a new window, create launchers to put shortcuts that will launch programs. Quite a lot to do. If you right-click on the panel, you get a panel section where you can either create new panels, or you can have the preferences. Notice it also has the button for new items for your panel. Here is what you get, and you can see that there's 1 panel right now, and that's at the top, but I can add more panels. There's a plus. And then within each panel, you have a lot of controls as to how big a panel you want. The dock at the bottom is technically a panel that's very short. And you can create the size that you need. How many rows do you want in each panel? Windows can do that, but this has been doing that for quite a long time. So there's a lot of customization of the panels. If you click on the button for items, here is a huge list of items that you can add to each panel. Now that works separate. So I can put certain, like I do on my real workflow, I can put certain icons on certain panels. And so you have all of these choices that you can add. So the panels in Xfce can have quite a lot of stuff on that. If we look at the cinnamon, and this should look very familiar to many people, because in the survey that we had, we found that a lot of people use mint and they use cinnamon. That's one of the 3 that mint offers, whereas some of the distros offer 4, 5, 6, and Ubuntu, excuse me, Ubuntu offers about 9 different desktops. And we talk about that in a different workshop when we talk about choosing distros. But again, this is a panel that's at the bottom with a start button that's a logo. And at the bottom right, you have your system tray, pretty much standard. If we right-click, a very similar menu that we just saw in Xfce. Now, I need to back up and explain so that new people, GNOME, KDE, and Xfce were one of the 3 first desktop environments that were developed back in the beginning of the Linux days. They went through changes. A lot of us in our early Linux days were using the GNOME 2 version and really liked that. Then GNOME the team went to a GNOME 3, and that's when things went sour. A lot of people didn't like what they were doing. Ubuntu didn't like what they were doing. So Ubuntu said, well, I'm going to take the recipe and we're going to make a desktop based off of GNOME 3, but we're going to make it better. And they called it Unity. Well, Unity lasted for a while and a lot of people didn't like parts of it. At the same time, people said, well, we don't like what GNOME 3 has done. We're going to go back and we're going to create a desktop based on the good GNOME 2 and modernize it and make it better. So I'm going to refer back to that. Cinnamon is one of those that said, we're going to take GNOME 3, and remember, Ubuntu took GNOME 3 and made Unity, and that went by the wayside, but it's come back again. And so Mint said, well, we like the GNOME 2 and we like parts of GNOME 3, so we're going to totally redesign GNOME 3 into Cinnamon. So there's a lot of things that Cinnamon can do that GNOME can't do. And that's why a lot of people say, well, I want to be able to do more. So I'm going to Cinnamon instead of the GNOME 3. So I said, so you can remember that the first GNOME that we looked at, GNOME 3, the right click didn't give you much. So Cinnamon said, we're going to put choices back in. If we do the right click on the panel, again, all the extra choices that somebody might not get in the regular GNOME. With the panel, one of the things that's really kind of nice that people like about the Cinnamon version is that not only can you take care of the length of the panel, you can have it go from side to side 100%, or you can make it shorter like that Conky or that dock was. So you can make that. You can also adjust the height of it so that the icons look better for you. But Cinnamon adds an even fancier that you can control the left, center, right sections of your panel separately, so that if you needed certain icons on the left side larger than the ones on the right, you can do that, or something in the middle. So they really went customizable on doing your panel. GNOME also said, hey, we kind of like that idea of KDE with their widgets. And so you can do both applets, which I think should be called panelets, because the applets are the things that you can add to your different panels, like we saw on the other desktop. But being KDE-like, you can have desklets, which are a lot like widgets, and add things to your desktop if you like to have things on your desktop. I'm a person that doesn't like desktop clutter, but you have your choice. So you have all of these. You can also notice that there's a tab for download. So the ones under manage are the ones that either came with the desktop, or you went to download and downloaded some additional ones. And the same thing for the desklets. Some of them come automatic, and then you can go to download and find more. And I've done that with mine, because I'm running Cinnamon on LMDE. So I have all of the Cinnamon features on that. Oops. Now, one new feature that came in with the Cinnamon is that you can access your virtual desktops or workspaces, whichever you call it, using the Control-Alt-Up arrow. And when you do the Control-Alt-Up arrow, you get your 4 basic workspaces. And you can see in my example here that I have one program in one desktop and one in the other. I do that quite a bit. you know, right now on my laptop that's showing the presentation, I have the Zoom going in one desktop and I have my presentation going in another. That just kind of keeps things organized. And on the right-hand side, you can see that you can add as many as you need, but 4 is what you have, and then you can have more. Ghosts. Mate was my favorite desktop for a long time. Mate is another one that is a revised, improved. But the Mate people, which was a separate kind of team, as I said, all of these are different teams. The Mate said, we really didn't like the GNOME 3. We really liked GNOME 2. We thought it was almost perfect, I guess I could say. Excuse me. So they went to GNOME 2 and they worked on it and modernized it, improved it. So that's the difference between Mint and Cinnamon for Mate. One's the GNOME 2, this one, and one's the GNOME 3. Mint used to have the KDE along with Xfce, and for some reason decided to drop the KDE, and so we go that way. With the Mate one, you'll notice that this one now came with 2 different panels by default. A top one, that's your main one, you can see, because that's where the menu bar is, and that's where your system is. But then at the bottom, you have another one where all of your running applications will show up. You also see that you automatically get the workspace switcher, so you don't need to know that there's a keyboard controls that switches, but you can go back and forth on that. So their idea, they know most people need more than one panel, so they do it, although you can always add panels. Right click, you're going to get the same, now I'd call it the more generic right click for the desktop with the same choices that you get for most. You know, with the KDE and Cinnamon, they add the desklets or the widgets, which don't come by default with Mint. And if you right click on the panel, you'll see that this is where you can add things to the panel or do the properties for the panel, and even, be careful, delete the panel. You also get the choice to create a new panel. So you get a lot of menu choices in the panel. When you add a panel, you have not as many choices as you can see. That's why I wanted to point that out in Cinnamon, where you could do left, side, center, and the right. You can create the size and put it where you want it, and then decide whether you want it full or where it expands the whole way. Here is where you add to the panel. So it'd be very similar to the things you could add in a Cinnamon panel. You just don't get the desklets. So all you do is be on the panel you want, click what you want to add from this list, and customize your panels like crazy. And just to show you how crazy it can be, I've got 5 panels on here. I put one on each of the exterior walls, and I even, who knows why, but somebody might have a reason, I have a double panel at the top. And you know that you can even make the panels wider. But one of the ones I showed you said that you could have it in 2 rows. So you can have 2 tiny rows of icons. Here it's just you're going to make it a larger. So if you wanted to be crazy, you could go with that many. You'll also notice that on the desktop, there was only one icon that was shown, and that was the home folder. Because I was using, it was great. With all of those live CDs, I was able to access the shared folder I have on this computer between the 2 operating systems to save all of my screenshots. And so because I mounted that one, it shows on there. But normally your icon, your desktop will just have the one folder for your home on there. If you click on the launcher, or the workspace switcher at the bottom, it'll pop up a miniature film strip of your current 4 workspaces, but you can go into the properties and add more. You can also do the Control-Alt-Up arrow, which was just like with the Cinnamon, but it's just going to bring up the 4 things you see at the side, just a little bit larger. So you have your choice to see whichever way. Now let's go to Budgie. Now Budgie is a development by a team that says we want to do things kind of a little bit different. And you'll notice that when we go through this. It's a very pleasant looking one. You can see that it shows things that you've mounted besides your home file folder on the desktop. It has the typical button at the bottom, which, most of Linux doesn't call it a start button. It's a button to reach activities or whatever. And so this one, they use the Hollywood squares for the button that you get to that program. If you right click, you'll notice that this is somewhat based off the GNOME desktop. Now remember, when you have a recipe, you can pick and choose. In a real recipe that you're baking, my wife does that all the time, you can pick and choose what you include, what you don't include, what you add, whatever. So they've kind of started with the main screen of the GNOME, because you can see that the only things you can do is go to the settings for the desktop and for the system. And again, if you right click on the panel, you get nothing, big double X. So the Budgie people said, well, we kind of like the basic GNOME beginnings of the desktop, but not for the whole environment. If we go to the desktop settings from that first right click, you will see that this is where you can add additional panels. This one started with a top panel. Started with a bottom panel. So they go through the sequence that if you add another panel, it's going to automatically be top. Add a third panel, it's going to be on the left. Add a fourth panel, it's going to be on the right. My preferred workflow is I have a panel on the top and on the right. So if I wanted to do that with Budgie, I would have to add the left one, then I can add the right one, then I could delete the left one and just have the ones where I want. But make sure you don't do what I did. When I was playing around with this and taking screenshots, I deleted the bottom panel, and that deleted all of the icons and the shortcuts and everything. And my virtual machine was dead. So I had to reboot and get back in and said, okay, don't delete the bottom until if you wanted to be on the top, move all your stuff up to the top. On the side of that, you can see I pointed to the button where you can click to add items to there. They call them applets. So interesting. They take the term applets from a different desktop, because we know that the GNOME doesn't do applets or anything on the desktop. So you get a list. The list is over on the left in this window. Oh, also, I had no choice in changing some of these backgrounds from dark. Some people say, well, it's harder to see the dark. With the GNOME one or the Budgie one, there was a button that says turn it to white. It would not go that way. I don't know, maybe that was because of live. But you can see here that you have a whole list on the left-hand side. I picked workspace switcher since I use that a lot, and it tells you about it, and then you can add it, and then you'll have it on your panel. So they have a number of these different applets that you can add and remove, because if there's something on there you don't like, you can take it off. Now we switch. This one has something new, whereas before with the Cinnamon and the Mate, we did a Control-Alt-Up to get to all of ours. Budgie and a few others now have a ability that you can use the left and right arrows to switch back and forth between your desktops. So you don't have to go to the switcher and see the whole thing and switch it, or you don't have to go down and click on the taskbar to see the switches. You can just do Control Alt left to right, and that's what I use a lot on my Linux Mint Debian Edition Cinnamon, is switching back and forth on that. Windows does it with the Control Window, obviously, and most of it is in the Linux is Control Alt. So you can easily move back and forth. And you can see that different from the GNOME, there are icons on this desktop. We had the file folder and the trash can, and because this should be the shared folder that pops up, which did not show up on the GNOME desktop. If we go to, so I went, this is the other one I was going to show you. So it kind of went backwards out of order. I added the workspace switcher to the top panel, and now it's up there at the top. So you could have that choice of there, or just run Control Alt left and right back and forth through that. It's all your what you like to see and what you like to have, what's best for you. Now, lot of, like with KDE, Budgie says, well, we're going to do some widgets. Now, the only problem is you don't get very many to choose from. And these widgets don't stay on your desktop. They pop out from the panel on the side. And so you can see, I think I added, just so I could add what wasn't automatic, the usage monitor, so I could see how the computer's doing. But these pop out from the side, very similar to the notification thing that pops up when you click that little thing in Windows. This one had a down the bottom corner, and you can add it. Now, it's, I think, possible, I didn't investigate completely because we're just talking about the basics, that you could probably go and find some more widgets to add to here, but that's only that came basic. But remember, in the other ones, it had a place you could go download. This one you're going to have to go and search on your own. Let's talk about LXQt. Now, LXQt started out as LMDE, I think, light desktop, light something. But this has been more modernized in the LXQt. This usually is found on distros that are great for older computers. But like I tell people, just because Xfce works on good on older computers with less resources, and so does LXQt. Doesn't mean it doesn't work great on a more powerful computer. And so when we take a look at the LXQt, you'll see that it's going to be developed kind of different. It has a panel at the bottom. Ignore the one at the top. I snapshot when I shouldn't have. It has the normal one at the bottom that looks very familiar. And a lot of people say that this is good for Windows people because it would have a very familiar feeling to Windows. It also has some desktop icons that show up. Right click, yep, same kinds of things that are default that you can do for a desktop, changing the backgrounds. Put launchers on the desktop, sort them, a lot like what Windows people knows how to do. If we right click on the panel, again, not only can you configure the task manager that's there, but we're not talking about it, and move it, but under the panel part, you can configure the panel, do some widgets, add a panel, and we'll see that. So if we create, we can create the panels, very customizable. You can tell where you want it, top, left, bottom, or right, and size it up on that. This is another one where if you don't want it to go the full length of the display, you can percentage it. You can also have multiple rows. Very customizable with the LXQt. If you click on widgets, here is a list, again, of widgets that you can add. Not as extensive as you would in the KDE because the KDE is totally customizable, but you can add widgets. After you've created a second workspace, then you can use the control left and right arrows to go back and forth. The computer is smart enough to say that isn't going to work if you only have one desktop because you don't need to go back and forth. The last one we're going to look at for the desktop is this Enlightenment, but this is the Moksha variation. I left it as the Enlightenment name because that's what it came from, what most people know. There are some distros that use the E17, but it wouldn't be as good as this one. Budgie is a distribution that we haven't talked a lot about, but this is another one that is perfect for lightweight or underperforming computers. This can go back quite a lot. And just because it's for lightweight doesn't mean that this is a lightweight or not very good distro. This is a very good one, like I said, but it works great on the lightweight ones. It has the panels at the bottom, traditional stuff on the both ends, but they came up with the idea that says we're going to put the workspace switcher right on the side. So, you know, you have that available up here, and whatever you put in there, there will be kind of a facsimile of it, not just a little square. Some of your desktop switchers will just show you that there's something in there. This one will kind of include that. If we right click, something very new, this desktop, you right click to get all of your favorites. So no matter where you are, you don't have to go down to a tab, a panel, or go to a screen. Your favorites are right there. Now, that's not really part of this topic. That's next topic of the start menu, but right clicking gives you your favorites. So if you can't get your settings stuff, what do you get? You do a left click. And when you, oh, no, you don't left click there yet. When you do a right click on the panel, there you are for the panel choices. of the settings for what you do on the panels there. Why did you jump back? When you go to orientation of your panel, you will notice that in this desktop, you can only have one. But it's interesting that not only can you have left, right, top, or bottom, you can have the top left corner, the top right corner, bottom, such as that. So you only get the one because when you try to click on one, it only has it's not a multiple choice. So they say you just need to have one, but you can have it in a variety of different places. You can also add, they call it shell contents. Sorry. But you can add things to the panel there. And you can go to an advanced one. Let's see if I got this slide on the advanced. No. And have more details about the gadgets, they call them, gadgets that you want to add to your panels. You can also do the left, right arrow with the control to go to your different desktops, but it's right there on the screen. So I'm not quite sure what advantages that has, but there are people who are keyboard people. All right, that ends our first part that shows a lot of the differences of the desktop. As I said, it's kind of an overload, but you get this slideshow so that you can go back and review. And I have put in every corner which desktop environment this came from. One of the second most important parts of the desktop is the start menu, which we all use quite a bit until you become a keyboard shortcut nut like me. When we go to back to the GNOME, we saw the Hollywood Squares button. And when you click that, you get a just massive list of programs. Similar to what I think Windows is doing. In this one, originally they would have been in alphabetical order. But GNOME stopped doing that and they just added. This box can hold 2 more icons, and then it will go to a second screen that you'd have to click to go to. You can see that you can group these together. So if you and for me, I would probably group all of my LibreOffice icons together in one, to save room. Also, you saw the panel at the top for virtual. Now, one of the things that you can do very easily with GNOME is that the dock at the bottom is your favorites. And so you can drag any program you want down to the dock for favorites, and you can drag off anything that you don't want that's on there. So it's customizable. And you can drag these icons and put your favorite one in the top left corner and do them. So this menu will not be alphabetical order, which is what usually like a Windows would be, and maybe a GNOME, but you can move these all around. And so people like that because I can have my favorites in that. And remember, the favorites will show up just when you click the applications or hit your super key. KDE, very, very customizable. Orv loves this one. This is the default menu, and it's kind of like the way most Linux goes, and it's in categories. When I was teaching computers and programs, I had a student who always complains, says, how do I know where to find a program I want to use? I don't really know, because the names don't always help you. Well, with the Linux, I showed her that most of the Linux put them in categories. And so with the default menu for KDE, everything's in categories. Your favorites are at the top, and then you can go to all or into specific categories at the along the side. When you click on those, the window pops open with what's included inside of those. and that's a very common menu for, you know, Linux. However, okay, get out of here. KDE gives you a second choice. And this menu, you can say, oh, that looks a little bit like a Cinnamon menu. Because in Cinnamon, as we will see, I'm giving it a spoiler alert, favorites are in the side column, and then everything else is in your categories. So they just move the favorites to that side, so it's permanently there along with all the categories. But KDE didn't stop there. No, you don't have one menu alternative, not two, but you have a third that will bring back memories to Microsoft's Windows 8 and the tablet. And so if you, especially if you would have a touch screen with your KDE, you might want this menu because of the way it's designed. The favorites are on the side, and then you have the categories with the all applications and such. So KDE is really great in that it gives you 3 different choices for menus as to what you want to use. Xfce, this was the original Xfce. Their menu is not a start menu, it's an applications menu. So when you click on it, it drops down and there's all your programs plus your system tools are on there also, and your file manager. So that menu gives you basically just your applications. But they have a second choice. One of the features I like most about Xfce is that no matter where my mouse is, I can right click and there's my applications. I don't have to go to that top left corner. I can just right click anywhere and there they are. So you wouldn't need to have that one up at the top if you didn't want it. It's right here. And that's really nice because how many times in whatever operating system you're doing and you want to get another program, you got to get your mouse, move it down, click on that icon. Here, just right click anywhere on the screen. There's your application menu. All right, I kind of gave it out before, but in the Cinnamon one that most of you know, there is the way it works. Favorites on the side, and then all the categories for your different things. But I added another slide because it turns out that if you, whoops, I got a screen that popped down in front of me. If you click on the icon for the program, you have a lot of choices. This is where you can easily add it to your panel or to the desktop. And that's something that the GNOME wouldn't do because GNOME doesn't give you the automatic choice of adding things to panels or to desktops. Or you can add it to your favorites. You can even uninstall a program. So this Cinnamon menu really is a big tool, all with multiple parts, you know, with it. If we go to, excuse me, if we go to the Mate, the menu drops down. It's very similar to the KDE's one menu where you have a favorites folder and then all of your other folders in categories. If you right click, you don't get as many choices as you would with the Cinnamon. You can pin it to your favorites or to your desktop, but you can't put it on a panel. You can't uninstall it from here. You have to do that in other means. I've got a screen on my screen that won't get out of my way, but it's not in your way. KDE gave you a couple of choices. One of the things that was so good about GNOME 2 was its menu system. And so Mate gives you access to that previous menu style. And I've added that. And when you look at the top, this is what a lot of us grew up in the early days of Linux, because this was the default for Ubuntu back in the days. You have 3 different drop-down menus. One for just applications, one for places, and that would be all your different hard drive locations, and one that was system. And that included the preferences and administrative choices. And a lot of people like that because whereas you get one menu that had this big, huge, giant list like you saw in Xfce, you get just what you're specifically looking for. However, the Mate team said, you know, we're going to go one step even further. Not only are we going to make some changes, but we can give you a choice under the Mate tweak for your panel. We can make your computer desktop look like Apple, and that would be the Cupertino choice. We can make it look like Unity. Remember I mentioned that the Ubuntu, their first attempt at refining GNOME 3, they put a panel down the side with restrictions. You can make it look like that, only they call it Mutiny. You can make it look like the contemporary one. You can make it look like Windows. See at the bottom, there's Redmond. So you could make this kind of even look like what you like it. There's a lot of choices. And one thing that I haven't gotten into is that you can enable a dock at the bottom for some shortcuts, but they have HUD, and that usually stands for heads up display. And they can add pull down menus. This Mate desktop with its tweaks is quite a lot. Now, I show this because tweaks came with Mate. Because somebody will say, well, there's GNOME tweaks. Well, it doesn't come with GNOME. You have to go out and get it separate. But Mate tweaks, there they are. So you can have it look like whatever you want. Budgie, doing a very similar menu, says we're going to have the categories on the left and then the programs on the right. But what you don't see is any kind of favorites. So if you have favorites, they will go on the panel. If you click on the actual program, all it does is tell you what it does. And that's helpful. You can't do things that Cinnamon can do. If we look at the LXQt, remember the LXQt is supposed to be lightweight, so it has a very basic menu system. It pops up categories, you click on that, and it goes out into whatever's in that. And for example, I just did that one. So you want a very simple menu system, LXQt has it for you. If we go to Enlightenment, we will find that they do the same thing with categories, only what they've done is they first categorize applications. Then you go out to that level. but you also have your places, and you have your setting, and you have system. One thing I thought was pretty interesting with the Enlightenment is that they include a screenshot shortcut. So instead of using the print screen, they have it right there available to take screenshots that you need. You can see that you can also, okay, this is where we come back. Remember in the beginning, we did a right click, and most of the time you get your desktop menus. And with Budgie, you just got those two of your favorites. Oh, that's what I forgot. So the reason they don't have the favorites is you right click anywhere on the desktop, and that's where your favorites are. Once you put a program in favorites, right click. Left click gets you the menu that most of the time is a right click. And here's where you can also get to all your applications and all your places. So the Enlightenment, or this Moksha, is unique in that your left and right buttons, left gives you your menus with all the things you need, right gives you your favorites. You don't need that menu thing down at the panel. The third aisle that we're going to talk about that's very unique to different desktops is the settings or your control panel. This one doesn't take as long to get through. Now, GNOME has changed a lot over the last few versions. The history of GNOME was you get very little choices in making changes, almost as like Windows. But in the more recent versions of GNOME, the settings have increased the number of choices. It was really easy before to show you people, well, here's all you can do in GNOME in turning some simple things like change your background or whatever, compared to what you could do in KDE. But the fact that people created a GNOME tweaks program to supplement what was lacking in the GNOME settings, the GNOME people said, well, you know, we don't really like it that the people are going out and getting adding tweaks or going somewhere else. So we've improved the size of your settings. And you can see along this list that has quite a number of options. And when you click on each, you can do whatever you want to do. But I'll tell you that this used to be very limited in the GNOME. KDE is the king of settings and customization. I have to take 2 screenshots to get the list that they have. And so you can see some of the choices on the top 2/3 of the list. And they're amazing because when you click on a setting, you get a sub window that you can see where all the changes and the stuff that you can do for all these. There's the rest of the list. So KDE is the king of the settings. So if you want a desktop that gives you massive amounts of customizations, that's going to be KDE. Xfce, like I said earlier, a lot of people think it's just, for the lightweight computers and stuff, but it looks old. That's one complaint. And the people who designed it said, do you want something that works or want something that's extra pretty? And when you go to settings, look at all the settings that you have. Xfce does not skimp on choices for controlling your settings. It even has a session manager, but you don't need to go to that because all of it's listed right here. If we do go to the session manager, this looks very familiar, the normal setup for categorizing your different setting activities, personal, hardware, system, and other. So KDE gives you the 2 choices. You can come to this, or Xfce, or you can just do it from the right-click menu. But this would be the menu that I would show people in the old days, comparing GNOME settings and Xfce, and the GNOME would be very sparse. Cinnamon, if you go to their system settings, did I skip one? Let me go back and make sure. Nope. You'll see that Cinnamon gives you more than the default settings for Xfce. So a lot of people, I think this is why they like Cinnamon and KDE. It's because of all the different options that you can go through. And you can kind of just look through that and see all the choices that you have with that. Mate, very similar. They just decided to do a little bit different, and for some reason give you a groupings on the side, but that still matches administration, hardware, internet, look and feel, and personal. But they also have listed some common tasks, like you want to change the theme of your whole desktop or set preferred applications. So they give you a couple of extra tasks that could be considered part of your overall control panel. And notice as I mark these, one will call them settings, one will call them control panel, and one will call it something else. This is Budgie, and you'll notice that I make a notation that this is more like GNOME. Remember that Budgie had the initial desktop was more GNOME-ish. Well, their menu is more GNOME-ish than the others, but still give you a lot to do. When you go to the LXQt and go to the settings, they also, just like with the Xfce, there is a link to the configuration center. They call it a configuration center, but they also have all of the main settings right there at that menu, so that you don't have to go that far. But if you go that far, you'll go, oh, yep, that looks a lot like the Xfce one. So LXQt kind of said, well, we like this from column A and this from column B, and you can do that and put it together because these are all separate components. And if you go to the open box settings, now we're not going to talk a lot about open box, but that's another Windows manager, and you've got controls on that. We have one more lighter weight version than Budgie and its Enlightenment one, and that is just going with a distro that uses open box, which is mostly right-click menus without a lot of extra stuff added to it. If you go to Enlightenment, they do it a little bit more like a Windows, because they've got their categories across the top, and when you click on them, they give you the list of what you can do. Just a team's idea of how it's going to be. The last main section is aisle 4, which is software store, the software manager, because that is where you go to get your new programs safely. This is the software program for GNOME. It's a very colorful looking one. They give you featured items at the top. Categories is different. They categorize their work as create, work, play, socialize, learn, and develop. And then they give you some editor's choice down the way. I will say that with the Ubuntu, especially, and GNOME, they really push for the snap packages that Cal has been teaching us all about. If you go down further so you can see the screen, they have other categories at the bottom, but the main categories were up at the top that I read. So when you click on something and go into the categories, you'll get a description of the program and the option to install it. And that's kind of nice to give you an idea and some recommendations about the program. GNOME also has a category for all of the programs that you have installed. So you can click on the installed, and this is where you would go to uninstall a program. Again, KDE, quite the elaborate. Look at all the different categories that they have. They have an installed option. They also have an update, so that if you come to check on what programs need to be updated, and settings for your software. And then there's all the categories that they have. Now on the home page, they let you know about popular, editor's choice, highest rated games. But if we go and click on uninstalled, here are the programs, and there's where you can uninstall it. It tells me right here that I have 4 updates to go, but I went and clicked on the category for, let me see if I did it on this one. Wrong way. I clicked on the one for graphics, and that took me the list of all the graphic programs, and I found that same one for the GNU. And this one, when you click on it, it gives you all the information on the side, and they have the install button here. So I didn't even have to click on GNU to read that. If I knew that's what I want, I could just click on install. Now, Xfce doesn't have the traditional software program. It uses what I call the in-between. In the beginning, everybody used the terminal, and with all the commands to install programs and whatever. Well, this is the middle program. This is Synaptic Package Manager. It's a GUI, but it's not the kind of GUI that everybody likes the show. You go to the categories, find the program. This time I picked Blender. It tells you something about the program. If you mark it to install, then they will tell you what else you need. So that's pretty much just a kind of a GUI front face for doing the command line, because there's the ones you added. So not as pretty, but very, very functional. If we go to the Cinnamon one, which is what a lot of people are using, very similar design. Not advertisements, but recommendations at the top. They're featured programs, and then they have their categories. And you can see that there's a number of categories that they have. With Mint, this is where it crosses over from the Cinnamon desktop into the Mate distribution. Mate is big on flat packs, so they have a whole section of just flat pack software, as opposed to the normal software that you install. You can go at the top and get the list of your included programs if you wanted to. If you click on a category, it'll go to the list. I did this one where I did the same GIMP, and it tells you about it. This one gives you the install, but because of Mint's using both system programs or packages and flat packs, you sometimes have a choice of which one you want to install. Once you install it, the same screen has the uninstall for that program. The Mate, little bit different approach. This is Mate from Ubuntu, so you'll see that they're featuring the Snaps package management. They don't do the Flat Hub. And they have what they call Explore. and features, and then they have it in productivity for their categories. The second bottom half, because this is a long one, shows their categories for what this one has. Plus they push the snaps. And when you go to productivity, then you get into the programs that you can see. Now they list, and so does Cinnamon, usually have a dot or a check mark so that you look down the list, you say, oh, I've already got that one, don't get it again. When you click on the program, it tells you about it and gives you the install. And you can even go and get an older pack if you want an older version. For some reason, it doesn't work with yours. Budgie, very, very simple. They give you a home with their versions of categories. You can also check for what programs need updated and what programs you have installed. So I selected the multimedia and graphics, and then I found GIMP in here. Once you click on GIMP, it's very similar. You get the details about it, and then at the button at the top, you can do the install. I was waiting to see what happens when it's done. It took forever, so I stopped. But it'll just be there. You go to the installed programs to get the uninstall. LXQt, I forgot to point out that in KDE, they call their software program Discover. And so this is what I think is neat about LXQt. It pulls from what it likes. And so it's kind of using the Discover KDE program for software, but modified it. Because notice at the bottom, they have their home, installed, and settings. This one tells you that because it's a new install, that there are quite a lot of updates, which I didn't do. But again, categories, I clicked on the graphics one, and very similar before, not only do I get the information when I click on the GIMP icon, I could have just hit install and gone from there. Enlightenment, totally different approach. All of their programs come from their website to download. And rather than create a software program that goes to the repository to get it, they just say you come to ours, because this way they can update it easily without having to update the whole desktop environment. So again, to me, the Enlightenment does not have the quantity, because you can see under multimedia, I only have 4 choices, and you got to watch. Sometimes your mouse wheel will roll through the slides. Sometimes they don't. You can see they didn't have very much on multimedia, and I didn't see one for the GIMP, but I went to multimedia, found the one for VLC, and when I clicked on the one for VLC, it described it and then gave me the install. Last big thing is File Manager, because that makes a change. But the one key thing I want to point out in this is that because of recipes and because of components, you can pretty much pick and choose what you want and build your own desktop environment, really. So this part is going to be File Managers. The GNOME one uses probably the Nautilus version. However, this is the GNOME that comes with Fedora, and they just call it Files. They have it in categories on the left-hand side. You can see they have a section that's their home section, a document section where a section where your folders are, and your hardware. for all your places. They don't have a lot of choices, but you can click and sort them and make the icons larger. Notice that there is no main menu on here, because with GNOME, there's nothing on the panels and you don't get a lot of choices. So you can make it larger. You can choose to have whether it's a list or icons. Not a lot of choices. If we look at, oh, here, I pointed this out. This is really interesting to me. They have a desktop folder. I put something in the desktop folder and it does not show up on the desktop. So I'm not quite sure why they have a desktop folder when it doesn't show up on the desktop. GNOME uses 2 tabs. As you can see, I added a second tab, but in order to move something from one location to the other, you have to copy paste. So it's not as simple as some of the other ones I'm going to show you. KDE, you have choices of whether you want to see it in icon view or detailed view. On the right-hand side, I want to point out they have a button that they can have a split screen, not an extra tab, an actual, like a second window. They have theirs in places first. Notice each desktop or each file manager kind of organizes it different way. And they have places first. They don't show all of your folders, like your shortcut folders to documents, pictures, because if you click on home, there they all are. But then there's all my different partitions that it showed up. And it noticed that I was plugged in with a USB drive. Excuse me. Okay. KDE will give you a lot of menu choices, which you don't get in GNOME with that. You get the total 2 different split panels, and this one, all you have to do is drag. If you want to move something to the other panel, you just drag it, and then it asks you, do you want to move it or copy it, or just put a link in here. Xfce uses the, oh, I forgot, KDE uses the Dolphin file manager. So if you liked what you saw as Dolphin, just add it to whatever distro you're using, and you've got, could use the Dolphin one. Xfce uses a very simplified one called Thunar. Notice that it only has places and devices, so everything is connected up with devices and just your one place. No shortcuts here. You can have the 2 panels. You can customize whether you want them. You don't have the choice at the top. You have to go to the preferences to change how the file manager works. You get a split view, not just the 2 tabs. And if you want to move something, oops. If you want to move something, I think it's, again, the drag, because you're going through 2 different windows. This helps a lot when you're moving files around. Cinnamon, this is using the Nemo, which is a remake of, or they consider improvement over the Nautilus that the GNOME uses, or GNOME uses. And you can see that they have it set up for all the different My Computer stuff with your shortcuts to your main folders, the devices, and a network spot. Up at the top, you can make it to be whether you want it to be icons or detailed lists. It also gives you a second panel or a split screen, and you can transfer files. But with this one, you just copy it and drag it. Whereas the other one, you had to have a second menu that said, do you want to copy it or whatever? You just drag it over. Wrong. Mate converts it and makes it into a Kaja. That's their program. And they give you, I really like the Kaja one because they give you a lot more controls right visible. You can change the icon view. You can increase the size. You can jump to a folder. They do the similar thing. There's all your computer stuff, all your devices, and the network. So it's very, very similar. What both the Cinnamon and Mate do is that if you right click on something, you have the option that you can copy it or move it to the other panel. No dragging needed. And sometimes that makes it easier because sometimes when you drag, things go kind of crazy. Budgie, based on Nemo, because remember, they sometimes use the GNOME stuff, sometimes they use the KDE stuff, sometimes their own stuff. Kaja. Oh my goodness. Budgie gives you 2 file managing programs for free. So you can either use this version, which is more limited. Remember when we showed you the Nautilus with GNOME, very limited. Or if you want more choices, you just fire up Kaja. It's in there. You don't even have to add it. LXQt uses a totally different one that we haven't talked about, a very good one called PC Man File Manager. And it's very similar. I used to use it along with either my Nemo or my Kaja. It just gives you a little bit different, a little bit more lighter weight, as it says. It gives you 2 panels and it gives you tabs. So on this left side, I've got 2 tabs on this panel and just 1 tab on that. I don't know why you'd go that way and go crazy, but you can. And if you drag the files, you get the option, do you want to copy it or move it? But you have to drag first. What I like about the Cinnamon or the Nautilus or Nemo and Kaja, right click gives you that choice and you don't have to drag anything. Enlight uses the Thunar. So again, it picks and chooses. We've seen that before. It's the lightweight one. They have tabs, no panels. So you have to drag to copy to other tabs or use the copy paste, which is maybe safer for some people. All right, I'm going to finish up real quick. Graphics, because these programs kind of deal with some with what the desktop environment does, some with what the distro does. But I'm going to go through these quick. The default, they call it document viewer. I used to always call it a PDF viewer. Is the basic one. A lot of these are all the same ones, but they have a little bit of a twist that the distro did to it. The image manager usually is the default, image viewer. So they all come with that. The KDE one, very similar. What sometimes is that they might add more features to what you get. All of these came from my shared folder. So the live distro was able to get to my shared and pull in pictures. Xfce, they use a program called Atril and one that I always fumble on pronouncing because it's Italian, Ristretto. Whereas the first 2 were basically the same. So these are usually lighter weight ones for like the Xfce. Again, there's ones that the Cinnamon ones, but with Cinnamon, they took those same ones and they've all modified them to X. Everything's an X thing. So they have the same programs. Same with Mate. These are the identical programs for Cinnamon Mate because they are Mint programs. Mint also included, oh, this is not the Mint, this is Ubuntu. They also include, that didn't come with anybody else, a photo manager, the Shotwell program. Budgie, they use the Mint programs. That's XReader and XViewer. That's the Mint programs. So Budgie says, well, we like something from this desktop, something from this desktop, and something from this distro. LXQt likes the KDE PDF program, which is Ocular. I like it very much. I think it gives you a lot of controls and extras than just being a viewer. And they made up their own image viewer, LXQt. PDF, no PDF reader in Enlight. I'm not quite sure whether that's because they say just use the browser or what, but no problem. Go to the source, see if they've got one, you can add it. But they do have their own program for screenshot. They call it ePhoto for Enlightenment Photo, and it does a combination of things. This is the screenshot program, and it's the viewer for those files. AV Tools, the same thing. Most everybody uses the Rhythm Box. This is the GNOME one. They use Rhythm Box, and they use their program called just Videos. Does the same thing. Interesting, KDE says, we only have one. We feel VLC does everything you need for audio and video. But of course, if you want something, you can. Oh, get out of my screen. Xfce, they have one that is a quote Libret, L-I-B-E-T, Libet. So they've customized a audio program, and they customize it. It's called Parole for their video, creating lightweight ones. Cinnamon, those of us, same thing, Rhythm Box. They modified the video game to be called Celluloid, so that is a Mint trademark. One other thing that Cinnamon adds to their audiovisual part is they have access to TV content. It's sort of like putting a Roku in your computer, because you can go and watch different TV shows, movies and stuff, and check on that out. Mate, Rhythm Box, Celluloid. So that Celluloid wasn't a Mint one. That's the other version. But this program with Ubuntu Mate was the only one that came with a webcam program already included. But if you don't have one, you can add one. As you can see, Budgie picked the Rhythm Box that most everybody uses and the Celluloid. LXQt, following the KDE, said VLC is all you need. And Enlightenment says, we're not giving you anything. You need something for audio, video, go get it. Thought that was quite interesting. I asked System Monitor. I only included this because this was a topic that we had talked about before, and system monitors are quite interesting between the different desktops. This is the one from GNOME, called System Monitor. It has 3 tab: resources, process, file systems. You'll see that in some of the others, they turn the order around. But this is the one that graphically shows you, this is what my computer was doing that night that I was making these slides. KDE does a different version of their system monitor. They've got circle graphs for memory and disk process. Plus they have a link to your applications, your history, and then your processes. And that's where you can go and, see what's running and kill what's not supposed to be there. Xfce uses the one, and that was what we brought up the other day when somebody had mentioned that theirs didn't look at all like that. Xfce uses more what they call Task Manager. It has 2 graphs that are very hard to read and all the systems. But again, Xfce goes for the lighter weight stuff. If you like the Xfce overall, but you want a different task manager or a system manager, install it. Cinnamon uses very similar to the one we saw before for the system manager, but it's kind of modified on theirs. Notice there's process resources file system. Mate, being the same family, system process resources. So they have the same kind of graphics. System tells you what's about the system. Whoops. Budgie, system monitor, that's probably the #1 that most people use because it gives you all that information. And LXQt kind of more or less went with the Xfce for their system monitor, because this one has one to me that's hard to read and just has a system. So I probably would replace that. And again, Enlightenment, being lightweight and whatever, doesn't even include one in there. I'm guessing they would say, if you want to know something about the system resources, go to your terminal and do that. This is easy because under the internet program, everybody uses Firefox. If they include a mail program, it's going to be Thunderbird. One change, Ubuntu uses Evolution, not Thunderbird. But if it came with Evolution and you like Thunderbird, you can just add it. And the other thing that was interesting is Enlightenment used strict Chromium, which is the pure Chrome without all the Google stuff. That was the original one. But for the most part, they all use Firefox. But Enlightenment says, well, we picked Chrome, but this is the only desktop that has a special link that you can install any browser you want. I thought that was kind of interesting on that. I did want to mention that I did check, and every distro but one that I was testing out discovered my printer and scanner, which is not connected to this computer. It was on the network, but every time I went to printer, it found them. And the couple programs that came with scanning programs, it found it there. Okay, so we're going to do that, and we're going to stop because that's it. As I said before, there becomes a cross between desktop environments and distros, what they do. I know that was lengthy, but the question was, what was kind of different? So I thought I would put together, and there was more. I had a couple of other things on my list that I categorized, and I said, well, they were all too much the same, or they really didn't fit. But some of the programs that they use are kind of related to the desktop environment, but then they're also related to the distro that you use. You'll get the slideshow from Judy when she has power again and can send out stuff. And then you can go through those and you can see it. Like I said, I've marked every one so you know which desktop environment it is, and each category that you can look over and see what it does. It's not a thorough test run. I offer anybody who is a user of any of these desktops, and we didn't even talk about Deepin, which is controversial because it's a Chinese developed one, but Ubuntu includes it, is a unique one. There's a new one that's just coming out that's System 76 that's called just my head, they just came out. Is it Galaxy? Something like that. So there are other desktops out there, and we would love for somebody to say, well, I use this one, and let me give you an in-depth 20 minutes on, on a desktop that would be your favorite and really go into deep. I'm not an expert. I just went through and found all this stuff that matched up to see what it could do. So, Bill, before we open things up, turn over to you and see.
Yeah, John, there's a couple questions. The first one is two-parter. Do you know the absolute minimum system requirements for the light distro of LXQt?
It wouldn't be the LXQt requirements. It's the distro that you're running it on. But if you go, the distro that I was using was Lubuntu, Linux or Ubuntu with the LXQt. But if you go to that, it'll tell you. And we're talking like 1 gig of RAM, old processor that's not a i7-5, whatever. But for somebody, you're looking, all you do is go and find the one you want to look at, and they'll tell you what it is. But both the Budgie and the Xfce and the LXQt can run on just about anything that's still running.
Okay. The second question, for distros that have multiple desktops or panels, can we have an application that can be in all of the panels if you want, or can one application only be available within one panel but not another?
Okay, now we have to make sure we clarify. Panels are the taskbars that go around your screen. And so I can put the same program in all 4 panels on my screen. Now, if we're talking about the virtual desktops, then I think that some of them have a option where it shows in every desktop or every workspace. That would be a unique thing, or you just open it in each workspace. But in terms of the panel just stays around your screen the whole time, and you can put whatever icons you want in that. So not quite sure if that answers the question, or if the question is asking the right way.
Okay. The next question, as a casual Windows 10 user, using Gmail, Google Docs, Zoom, and YouTube, which version of these Linux desktops do you prefer?
Well, you're asking a non-Apple person, but to me, it sounds like you're more of a Chromebook user with your web, but you'd have to do the web stuff on that. So sounds like with the iPhone and Outlook and Gmail that you're a Chromebook user, but you could do any of that on most Linux distributions. KDE has a program that comes with KDE, but I have it on my LMDEs that is called KDE Connect, which connects your smartphone to your computer. So I have that on mine. So basically, I think anything that you're using on there would work on any Linux version, but most of that, I think Bill and a few other people would say that sounds like a Chromebook person because of using mostly web stuff.
Yeah. The next question, is there any distro that would be better than the others for importing Windows settings? I guess if you're converting from Windows to Linux, can you import everything into the new operating system?
I think, and we'll when we have the open discussion shortly, others can say it depends on how you export the settings out of Windows. What kind of files that is, creates. And I don't know if they would match up, because it might match up to one different desktop environment, not the other.
Now, some operating systems these days have a migration tool that you can use, to transfer data between two computers over Wi-Fi or data cable. So does Linux have anything like that?
Yeah, in transferring files, there's no issue on your data stuff. It's just copy it over. The settings would be the one that might have it because of the way it's design coded. But to me, it isn't that much to go in, find the one that has the settings mostly the way you like it, and then just tweak it to that. But before I retired at school, the school was Windows, and I did all my work on a Windows machine, saved all my work either through thumb drive or cloud, and then went home and worked on it on my Linux machines. And then I created things in Linux on my home computer and sent it some way, thumb drive or cloud, back to my Windows computer and used it on there, because I was using the same programs on Windows and on Linux. And that's the easiest way to learn how to transfer, is you use the same programs and you have no problem.
Okay. And then this is my last question. Are there any distros that would be better than others for optimizing the hardware?
Well, since we weren't talking about distros today, but we can ask that in the open part. I haven't found any problems with, like I said, today, with every one I used, of those 8 on a virtual machine or just a live on the Ventoy, every one of them found the printer that's over there that is not even connected to that computer. And in any program that had the camera, it found the camera that I had plugged in to my my computer. So I don't feel that there's a big issue with any distros working with the hardware. Nowadays, the NVIDIA and all the videos are not an issue as much. We always say, yeah, we've talked about printers, that once in a while you find a printer that doesn't have good enough drivers, but that's the fault of the companies that make 1,000 different printers, and you have to have different drivers for everything. So, but no, I don't seem to have a worry about one distro doing better. I do know that the MX distro that I like has 2 different versions. One's this version, and one is HCUG, a advanced hardware something, and so it's designed for the newer hardware stuff. So if you got an older computer, you can use the better 64-bit one, but if you have the newer one, they've got one that's AHW or AH something.
And another question did pop up. Would a Firefox profile folder from Windows work on Linux?
It's not a Windows profile, it's a Firefox. So yes, all the ones, from the Google, the Firefox, that's Firefox to Firefox. It has nothing to do with the Linux or Windows.
So in other
Mac.
words, if it's web-based, there's not an issue.
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah, I would agree. All right.
Yeah. So we're at the point where open things up. If anybody wants to share their talks about desktop environments and things like that, what's your favorite? What's your favorite part of it? I've shared some of what I like about this and that and whatever. So we're open for open conversation. Throw your hand up. Share with us. We've got some time. Hey, Richard, we're not done yet, but we'll let you talk.
Yeah, I was wondering, any of those desktops with multiple panels let you put a different background on the individual panels, so you can see at a glance which panel you're in.
Yeah, I like that idea. I get mad. I think the Cinnamon one doesn't have that feature, but other ones that I've tried, I've really liked it, that you can put different, and that does, but it also gives you the chance you're not looking at the same background every time, all the time. Get your choices. So that you might look, if you like to have different backgrounds, make sure that the desktop environment that you're picking allows for different backgrounds on each panel or each background, each desktop or workspace. John.
You said on the Budgie desktop you lost the panel.
Oh yeah.
Did the flag key fail? You couldn't use a flag key to bring up a menu?
I didn't even try it because I was more concerned about everything else on the menu that I needed, other than doing the we call that the super key. And since I had more screenshots to do, I needed that back there. So I just, it probably would have worked because I did a Control-Alt-Delete and rebooted.
Okay.
But I just made that mistake. So yeah, I'm sure that the super key would have worked to bring up the menu, but it wouldn't have brought any of the other stuff back.
Well, I mean, you could from the menu, you can get the panel back through the settings. But
that might have been possible. Yep.
Anyway, I'm also I use Linux Mint with Xfce and Thunar, and I created a folder and copied it to the desktop folder, and it didn't put it on the desktop either.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I just thought that was GNOME that didn't do that.
So I started using Xfce after that for a file manager, and that works pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
So just a comment.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
Uh-huh. Any of you new users that have questions bound by the desktop, since it was a new user that said, what's all this about desktops? Because you Windows people, you don't have any choices. You've got one desktop. You can move some things around, but you can't do like what we can do with the all the different desktop environments that we have in Linux. Yeah, see people nodding and agreeing.
Well, that would hold true for Mac users as well.
Right, because we say that Mac is a distant cousin. Mac came from the Unix family too.
Let's see that. Then there is another question. Oh, is there an antivirus or ad blocker preferred for use on a Linux laptop, or is it not necessary?
Ad blockers, yes, because you're dealing with not Linux, you're dealing with the web. You're dealing with the World Wide Web. So, you know, everybody recommends that when you're using a browser that you think about ad blockers. As opposed, or as a side on the antivirus, you know, we have antivirus programs. The AV-CLAM is the one that most use. It's not an automatic running. It's one that you run when you think there's a problem, because we've talked in the past about the fact that most of the viruses that are written for Windows, executable files that do not run in Linux. The Linux security is the most where things cannot run by themselves. They have to be given permission by the user. So as long as you don't give anything that you don't know what it is permission, you're not going to. I have been using the Linux for years. I have a laptop, 2 desktops. None of them have a virus program running. I do have, you know, the CLAM CTK, which is the graphical one, available, that if I wanted to check something, I could. But, you know, I don't run it. Most of the people that I know don't run it regularly, because you either keep your computer up to date like you're supposed to, don't click on links that you don't know what you're doing, and the fact that you have your permissions that say nothing can run on my computer unless I say so. So nothing can automatically pop up and start running. So if I did get some kind of a virus in, it wouldn't do anything because it would have to get permission first. But yeah, get the CLAM TK is out there. It's not a pretty looking one, but it doesn't need to be pretty. It needs to be where you say, I want to scan this. A lot of times, you know, I might use a antivirus program that if somebody gave me a program to pass on to another Windows user, I might run it through the AV program just to make sure I'm not passing on something that I wouldn't want to give to somebody else, like our virus. But like I said, I don't know, I've been using the Linux for not quite 20 years, 2008 after that, but no, I don't. And, you know, we could do a real poll quick question and find out how many actual Linux users, you know, run a program. There's some out there. They claim that there are programs. I've tried to go and get some, but they all then say that they don't, well, they don't run on Linux or what, but you know, I'm running my stuff.
What you're saying, John, is that Linux is not inherently subject to viruses.
I would kind of say that. Anybody else who's a Linux user can make comment on that. Like I said, I have not had anything happen to my Linux computers unless I did it myself.
That's interesting.
Yeah. But then, you know, we all teach, for whether you're a Windows, Mac, or a Linux user, we all teach smart things. And like, you know, Judy would, if she were here, she would say, you know, don't click on links that you don't know what they are. Don't go down dark alleys, you know, be safe.
So, well, I guess the next question is there such thing as, you said, I think you said that they do exist, but is there actually a such thing as an antivirus program written for Linux?
Yeah, it's called CLAM. You know, AV-CLAM is more of like a command line one, but then there's ClamTK. Let me see if I have it. Yeah, I'm going to share my screen just because that way you can see it. Share screen. So there's my program. It's called ClamTK. Needs to be updated because you see I haven't had the program on, but it does the same thing. It lets me update it, and then it lets me just pick what I want to scan, and I scan it. I can scan a directory, a file, because directories are what everything is in Linux, and if I need to. But as you can see, it's out of date because I haven't opened this program in quite a long time because
John, just for a scenario, say
Yeah.
for instance, if I sent you a file
mm-hmm.
and unbeknownst to me, it had a Trojan or some nefarious program embedded in it,
Mm-hmm.
and you try to install it on Linux, what would happen?
Well, first of all, you probably wouldn't send me a program because as a Windows user, your programs are exe files. And exe files will not run on Linux. We have a different kind of file system.
Okay.
So the chances of you sending me a file is not as likely as window to window.
Well, let's say for sake of argument, what if it was a picture or JPEG
Okay. Yeah.
or one of those type of files that had an embedded
Because those are cross-platform and even doc files and stuff. But I can run a scan on a file.
But say for instance you didn't run the scan on the file, what would happen?
Depends on what the purpose of that malware or virus was.
Okay.
It's going to be the same thing. But the biggest thing I think is the fact that they're written, for specific purposes. And again, the inherent nature of Linux is that programs cannot run without my permission. And that's in Windows world, that's also how you be more safe by not running as an admin all the time, by running as a standard user that requires permission to run certain things. Linux is inherent that way. I'm running always as a standard user, and in order to run something, I have to probably give it a password. So if something wants to run and I wasn't running it, I would say, we're not going to give that permission.
Okay. Oh well, I don't know why you guys can ask these questions direct.
Yeah,
All
put
right,
your hand
hold
up.
on a second, because I'm gonna let's see.
Oh,
Uh,
my friend Andy let me know, and that's because I haven't used it, that GitHub says that ClamTK hasn't been updated since last year. Probably because so few people use it. Interesting. So I might as well get rid of ClamT if it's not going to be updated. Any other? Yeah.
Something about posting the Linux AV in the chat.
Well, I'm not going to do that now because Andy, who I know is a knowledgeable person, just said it's not been updated since
whenever
March or something of last year. But as I say, knocking on wood type thing, I've been using Linux for, I retired in 2008, left Windows at school, and, been running that because I don't remember what the first Ubuntu I did used, and I have not, like I said, other than my doing something and messing, I haven't had any problems. John.
I believe it might not be needed to be updated. I think there's only been 7 or 8 Linux specific viruses written.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, there's so few viruses and things written specifically for Linux that it's really doesn't have to be updated too often.
Yeah. One of the things is that we find out that most of the times that there have been any problems with viruses and stuff with Linux has been directed towards the servers. And what usually is the end result is that it's found that some human erred that caused the problem with the virus, not keeping something update or not doing something. They don't usually mess with the home user because we're not doing anything. And if they mess with us, it's not going to make a major effect. So I agree with that there's not as much written because people know that the security is very tight on Linux, but they count on human error. And that's usually what happens. If there's something that happens, the story I always tell people is, yep, things happen, but there was a problem that it was a web problem. There was a link on a web page to download a Linux distro that was directed to a infected version. The problem was that the security on the website to protect somebody from coming in and adding something that they shouldn't have been allowed was the problem. Once it was discovered that there was a problem, that was immediately fixed because open source in Linux, everybody knows what's going on. Everybody is tracking. Everybody is looking for code mistakes. And so anything that does happen seems to get fixed right away. But usually it's a human error that has something that goes with that. Rose, then I'll do the one that was sent to me.
Over the years, I'm a definite Windows Apple person, have been, and since being connected with APCUG, I've been interested sort of in the Linux stuff, but been very scared of it. From your presentation today, it gives me courage to maybe give it a try. And
good.
But and also from a comment that Bill just made, I think, or both of you, is it possible I have a 2015 MacBook laptop that I never use, and it's taking up space, and I'm thinking, can I convert that to be able to play with Linux and see what I'm doing? And if so, what do you recommend? What's the direction I go to start doing this?
What I would do, Rose, is to put you into contact with one of my club members who's been having a ball doing that. He's been converting old MacBooks into Linux because he said it's doable, and he said when it comes out, they're a powerful machine. He said, they work great. Earlier days, my understanding is it was harder to switch them over, but yeah, I'd put you in contact because I don't know the steps. I've never done it, but because our club gets recycled material, and if we get MacBooks that can't be used anymore as Mac, he takes them and he does his thing and puts Linux on them, and then we refurbish them out to people. So yeah, it can be done. And you know, Rose, I would say, with being an Apple person, as it was mentioned, you are very close to being a Linux person.
Okay.
Because both, you know, Linux and Apple came from the Unix and just went little parallel paths. So there's a lot of the Apple stuff and Linux stuff that are kind of basic, have the same things. The difference is that Apple went private and everything is proprietary and everything is closed source, and the Linux world is all open source. But you know, a lot of the ways it works in the file systems, and you know, I'm not a Mac person, but that's my understanding, is that they're very, you know, cousiny.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it would take too much brain power for me to make the switch. And I mean, even with our club, I was doing a lot of the teaching. I was the only one teaching Apple. Even though my main love is Microsoft, but I love dabbling in all this stuff, and I keep leaning toward Linux to try it, but after today, I'm willing to give it a shot.
That's great. And I think that the thing is, we're going to have a lot of people in this coming year who have computers that still are very functional, but are going to have a hard time moving up the line with Windows.
Mm.
And, you know, people are going to say, especially if we have huge increases in computer prices coming up, that I don't want to buy a new computer. I have a computer that's working fine. Well, we have solutions for it. You have a Mac Pro that can be converted into a Linux and have lifetime. We've had brain gone there. We've taken Chromebooks that no longer have life with a Chromebook, but put Linux on it and it's continuing on. And we can do the same thing with computers that were running Windows and be able to extend their life.
Okay.
Because my desktop, this laptop has got to be at least 8 years old, and it's still running fine. And my desktop might be 9 years old, and you know they're starting to show age just because they are. But with the Linux, I'm just running, going fine. Joel, did you have something you wanted to add? Unmute.
Yes. I couldn't see that my hand went up.
It went up and
Okay.
then went right back down.
Okay, well, the Clam AV program that was mentioned, or was it Clam DK? I can't remember what you called it, but I think
the Clam TK is the graphical one.
Right.
The other Clam is the terminal one.
I think that the Clam TK is just an interface to the other,
Correct.
So that you wouldn't expect the TK one to get any updates. The comment about there not being any Linux viruses, Clam AV is supposed to check for Windows viruses, because the whole point is, if you have a Linux system and somebody sends you an attachment, you don't want to forward it to somebody that has a Windows system if it has a virus in it.
Right.
So it's supposed to check for Windows viruses. If its database is not getting updated, that could be a problem. I'm trying to figure out some way to verify whether that database is getting updated or not.
Uh-huh. That's good. I had a question that was posed into here about bringing an Excel file into Linux. No problem, because the LibreOffice program, which is cross-platform, it's not, you know, Linux. We use it in Linux because that's the good one. Will read almost any kind of spreadsheet. So all you have to do is get it from one computer to the other, either email it or cloud it or thumb drive it. So yeah, so LibreOffice will open it up and use that. Yeah. Rick was pointing out what I was kind of saying is that the viruses, the original ones, were mostly rootkit, which meant that they try to attack root. And so if the root isn't running, because you know, in Linux we don't run as admin, we run as a standard user, and then We can switch to root when we need to, or give permission for things. So, you know, that's part of it, is that, and I think the biggest problem in the earlier days is that in Windows, everybody ran as an administrator all the time. And now Microsoft is saying the first user needs to be an administrator, everybody else needs to be standard user. And I know that when I taught classes, that the big problem was that in the first days, you were either an administrator or a limited user. And people said, I don't want to be limited. So they would be in an admin. Now Microsoft is changed to admin user and a standard user. So standard user, you do everything you want except for those things administratively are tricky that can affect your whole computer. Steve.
Yeah, if you wanted to test a file when you're passing it on, you could always put it onto the virus online scanners.
Ah, yeah.
There's one called Total Virus Scanner that it sends the same file to all the scanner programs. And if it doesn't find anything, you can be pretty sure that it's safe.
Yeah, I forgot about that. You know, since a lot of what we do is web-based, you can now send photos up to the web and do all your editing instead of on your computer. Yeah, so yeah, if you have a question, send it up to the web and let them find out. Dennis.
I had asked the question about opening. I'm a new Linux user.
Right.
Opening Excel files, on the Linux machine, which I haven't tried yet. But I have a bunch of old Excel files. If I open one and update it, does Windows reciprocate? Can I send my LibreOffice new file now back to a Windows user, and can they open it, or there's no reciprocity anymore?
The way you do it, so you know, and welcome to Linux, of course, is how you save it as a file type. You're going to be sending yourself a calc file. I mean, an Excel file that's a dot, whatever. I can't, I don't use that. With LibreOffice, it reads Windows files, formats, can save them as a Office format, or can save it as a LibreOffice format. So the trick is, what does the person you're sending it to need? I sent files back and forth when I was doing, before I retired, between home and school, because I use LibreOffice at school too. So with Judy, I can send her an open document file, or I can send her a Microsoft file because she has both programs. So it's just a matter of knowing which file type the recipient needs. So you can open up the file in Linux with LibreOffice and save it as an Excel file and take it back to Microsoft Office, or you can save it as a ODS file, I think ODS for spread, and use it on your Linux machine. Now, if you send them that file, they might have trouble opening it because Microsoft says we're only Microsoft. We don't look at anything else.
Same thing with Word as well. Besides,
oh yeah.
Sure. Okay.
And the PowerPoint, LibreOffice reads all, and LibreOffice reads all of Windows Word, Office programs, and WordPerfect, and this, and it'll even read the old Microsoft Works files.
Wow. All right. Thanks.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah. Just go in, and when you go to the file save as, drop it down, and you'll see all the different file types that'll save. And if you go to file open, you can drop that down and see all the different kinds of files that LibreOffice will open. Joel again.
Yes, I'm just going to say, with all of the recent versions of Microsoft Office, both Microsoft Office and LibreOffice will read and write each other's file types. Now, the difference is the OpenOffice file types have been openly defined for a long time. So if you have both programs available, you probably will get better results trying to convert an open format to Microsoft format from Office than you will trying to produce a Office file from LibreOffice. So occasionally there are some incompatibilities that will show up, and the two different ways of converting, either using Office or using LibreOffice to do the conversion, you may get slightly different results. And then one other thing, there are some features in both that are incompatible. So if you have some cases where somebody has used that, you may not see things show up in the same way. Fonts are also different because the fonts that Office uses on Windows are proprietary Microsoft fonts. There are fonts that are close to it on LibreOffice, but not exact. So sometimes ends of sentences will occur on different lines, or the line map may be slightly different, or even the page content might be slightly different. So both of them understand each other's formats, but not exactly.
Yeah. And that was a trick, you know, in the beginning, they didn't want to. But now Microsoft says we got to live in this world where the worldwide standard is LibreOffice and Open Document, and we got to play, you know, fair together. I can remember how much fun I had when Office went from their different versions, and older versions of Office couldn't open the newer version, but yet Linux could. So if somebody had a file, I could open it up, you know, and print it out because LibreOffice could read those newer files, but Windows people had to have their converters and stuff. But yeah, I will admit that there are certain things that Microsoft has designed that for their Excel and Word, they're big fancy. But I keep saying that the general public, the general people who use general word processing, spreadsheets, presentation programs, they are all good because you're not using difficult stuff, you know, these big script stuff or whatever that I never use. But I never have any problems because of what I use. I'm just a simple basic person. I'm not in the business, so I don't use heavy legal documentations and all that stuff. John.
Linux Mint, you can download a whole list of TrueType fonts.
Yep, you can add those in. But like Joel said, the problem becomes in as to some pure Linux people refuse and will not use proprietary stuff. So, you know, then they become limited.
You can actually copy one from Windows over to a Linux system, but it's not legal to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So APCUG does not recommend, but you can do it. Anybody else to finish up today? I know we feel bad about Judy not being with us, but as far as I know, she's not in fire danger. She just keeps losing her power, and then she's stuck on the 3rd floor, and her refrigerator goes out again, and then her food goes bad and all. So we'll just hope that things change out there. I'm hoping that Orv Beach, who's now I'm hearing them talk about the Simi Valley because that's where Orv is from, and before it's always been kind of okay. Richard.
Yes, there's a website, DistroC, that allows you to test the different Linux distributions online. So if anyone wants to dip their toe into Linux, that's a way to do it without even downloading anything.
Yeah, it's great. I was going to use that to do these presentations because I said, why don't I just go to DistroC, fire up the program, make my screenshots, and then when I started doing that, it said you're 3rd in line. So I tried a different distro. You're 2nd in line. So I said, Ventoy is going to do it. Just download the ones I need, throw on the Ventoy, run them, and then I've got them, and I don't have to wait in line. And somebody mentioned in a comment, which I tell everybody, even if you're a Windows Office user, LibreOffice is free. Download it and you have both, best of both worlds. And then you can do whatever you need to do either way. My feeling is for new people, the more you use cross-platform programs, the easier your move from Windows to Linux can be. Because when you're using the same software, there's no learning curve. And I have to say that there is no learning curve unless you get somebody to throw in the terminal and the command lines. As long as you're doing what I showed you with these desktops, you're doing the same thing you've been doing, pointing and clicking on menus and pulling up programs. And if you pull up the programs that you know that you've been using, you don't know you're in a different world. This is the last, no, this is the third weekend. January has 5 weekends, so don't let that confuse you. We are scheduled for a program next week, a good program. Hopefully Judy will be with us. Otherwise, she will be trying to remotely get the set out. I had my list, wait a second, right here. Oh yeah, you want to be here. I don't know what the second part of the program is, and I don't think that we have one, but Tanya Harding, who many of you saw her 2 years ago, she's been with us a couple times. She's the deputy from Oklahoma, and she was the one that taught us about how you needed to sit at home and practice doing your neck twists as far back around as you can, so that when you're out in public, you can see what's coming around. She's great. She was going to be with us last year, but we had a scheduling problem. Bill knows her. I think Bill's had her at his presentation. She's great. She'll be back next week with her stuff about senior safety and all of that stuff. I will say that in February, there's only going to be 2 meetings because we throw in a Saturday safari and that kind of messes it up. But I want to know that John Kraut will be with us for the second part in February 12th, doing a presentation on hard falling for phones and stuff. But you want to be here on the February 12th because the people from the cybersecurity, remember we had a program from Lisa, her whole team says, when she told them about us at APCUG and our workshop, they want to get with us. And so they're going to be with us at the first hour. I guess they want to have us like a sounding board and talk about security and cybersecurity and all that. We'll have more details out on that. And then February is also a Saturday safari, and she's working on that. So next week, definitely you want to be around. Watch for the link, because Tanya is just so funny, because she was the one that was telling us when you do your checks that you need to use the special pens, but with her Oklahoma accent, it's jail pens and not GEL, gel pens. It comes out, you need to have jail pens. So I figured we'll go down to the police station and steal their pens. So she'll be with us, and she was great. She's the one that taught us about carrying a second set of keys in your hand that do not unlock your car in case somebody wants to hijack. You throw those keys, and when they go after those keys, you use the real keys to get in your car and lock it up. Lots of good stuff. So we'll thank everybody for being here. Everybody keep safe. We've got snows coming through. Like I said, Ohio, we're going to have snow tomorrow, about up to 1 to 3 inches. And then Saturday, it's going to be rain. Then the temperature is going to drop and all that stuff's going to freeze. So the snow is moving around. Fires are moving around. Oh, everybody take it easy. And Bill, save your chat again and send that to Judy. And I'll send what I've got. And we'll see everybody next week for Tanya.
Thank you, John. I really enjoyed this.
I'm glad you did. It was a big, huge the slideshow is large, but I think it covered a lot of information that people wanted to know about all of our choices with desktops. And I'm one of those that I like parts of each of them. I'm settled on the Mint right now, but boy, oh boy. All right, talk to everybody later.